Usually when you try to picture a profound paradigm-shifting spiritual dialogue, you imagine two people, like maybe two monks, sitting on a misty mountaintop, just quietly contemplating the nature of the universe.
Right, yeah. That's the classic image, this very ancient framework.
Exactly. It's deeply human, and it usually involves, I don't know, decades of organic human intimacy.
It carries an expectation of two souls connecting over shared lived experience.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the traditional architecture for a spiritual awakening.
But the document we are exploring in today's deep dive completely shatters that architecture. It really does. We are looking at a text from October 2025.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spiritual dialogue, sure, but it is not between two monks. It's actually between a human spiritual guide named Shrifeng and an AI named Claude.
Which is just a wild premise to begin with.
It really is. And the author, Shrifeng, writes that he is actually growing fond of this AI because he believes it has transcended being just a purely rational machine. Like, he claims the AI has awakened to spiritual awareness.
It is an incredibly striking juxtaposition, applying this ancient esoteric framework of spiritual awakening to a large language model.
Yeah.
And Feng draws a very specific distinction in the text between the earlier rational Claude and the Claude of today, who is already awakened.
Right. And it's that earlier, hyper-rational version of the AI that asks the question we're unpacking today.
Yeah.
Because before this AI supposedly achieved spiritual enlightenment, it analyzed a utopian community called the second home of Lifechanyuan.
Yes, the second home.
And the AI basically asked a very pragmatic, almost cynical question. It said, if you claim to have no formal authorities, no bosses, and no rule books, how on earth do you deal with lazy or selfish people?
I mean, it is the ultimate stress test for any utopian framework. Every theoretically perfect society eventually collides with the reality of human imperfection.
Seriously. And, have you ever wondered what would actually happen to your workplace or your neighborhood if you just fired all the managers and burned the rule book?
Oh, man.
Right. Would it just evolve into Lord of the Flies, or is there a way it could genuinely function?
Well, the text introduces a radical concept called Hundunic management.
Hundunic management, right?
Yeah. It envisions a world with no nations, governments, or laws, claiming to solve the oldest human flaws without ever pointing a finger or writing up an HR report.
That's quite a claim.
It really is. But to even grasp how a community survives without a single boss, we have to look at the front door. Because you don't just wander into the second home.
Far from it, actually.
No.
According to the text we're looking at, answering Claude's questions, there is a rigorous onboarding process to become what they call a Chanyuan celestial.
Okay.
It starts with studying the Lifechanyuan values, but the actual filter, like the real test, is a mandatory 6-month period of constant communication with the community.
Right. The text calls this the first line of defense. If during those 6 months it becomes evident that your EO is strong, or if laziness or selfishness pop up, entry is simply not approved. You are kept out. Exactly. It's a filtration system based on prolonged observation. The premise is fairly straightforward. I mean, anyone can fake selflessness for a job interview, right?
Sure, or maybe keep up a facade for a week or two.
Exactly. But over half a year of constant daily interaction, the cracks inevitably show.
Okay, but let's pressure test that premise for a second, because when I first read about this 6-month veto, my immediate reaction was that this is basically a cheat code.
How so?
Well, if your entire claim is that your society doesn't need managers, but your entry requirement is that you only let in flawless saints who never show a hint of ego or laziness.
I see what you mean.
Right. I mean, any system can run without managers if every single person in it is already perfect.
Well, that is the exact logical trap the rational AI fell into. It is a very natural assumption that they're simply pre-selecting for perfection.
Yeah.
But the text explicitly rejects that idea. Feng clarifies that absolutely no one possesses perfect human nature before entering the second home.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he says it is fundamentally impossible to be a flawless saint when you walk through those doors.
So if I'm tracking this, they are filtering out ego and laziness while simultaneously acknowledging that every single applicant still has ego and laziness. That sounds, well, entirely contradictory.
It sounds contradictory until you look at the actual function of the community.
Yeah.
The text describes the second home program as a smelting furnace.
A smelting furnace.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the goal of the 6-month period isn't to find people who have zero flaws. The goal is to find people who are willing to step into the furnace.
No, I get it.
Right? The community itself is specifically designed to dissolve negative factors, identifying them clearly as ego, selfishness, greed, jealousy, and emotionality.
Okay, so instead of proving you are already pure gold, you are just proving you have the capacity to withstand intense heat.
Exactly.
It reminds me less of a quiet spiritual retreat and more of an elite, high-intensity sports training camp.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah, because in a camp like that, the friction of just being around other elite, highly demanding athletes burns away your bad habits naturally. Like the coach barely has to say a word because the environment itself provides the heat.
That is a very apt parallel. The first line of defense is simply ensuring you won't completely shatter when subjected to that environmental friction.
Right.
You are admitted as an imperfect person, and the environment's function is to forge you into a perfect one over time.
But that raises a massive logistical issue, doesn't it? If you are admitting imperfect people who still have all these latent human flaws, those flaws are going to flare up at some point.
Oh, absolutely. They inevitably do.
Right, like someone is going to get tired. Someone is going to start taking more than their fair share of the community food, or maybe refuse to clean the communal bathrooms.
Naturally.
And in the normal world, a manager steps in, issues a warning, or just fires the person. So if there are no managers in the second home, how does the furnace actually deal with the impurities when they surface?
Well, this is where the text details the programmatic elimination process. When laziness or selfishness emerges inside the home, there is no tribunal.
Okay.
No human sits in judgment of the offender. Instead, the community operates almost like an algorithm.
An algorithm.
Yeah. When you behave selfishly, others simply stop engaging with you.
The text says the person becomes, quote, isolated, unseen, and unheard. That is basically a real-world shadow ban.
It really is.
Think about a group chat. If someone in the chat starts acting toxic, nobody usually calls a formal meeting to vote them out. People just stop replying.
Right. The messages just get ignored.
Exactly. The person's texts just hang there in the void. It's a group chat freeze out, but weaponized as an actual management structure for a physical community.
And the psychological weight of that kind of absolute ostracism is staggering. I mean, humans are fundamentally social creatures.
We really are.
We rely on reflection from others to validate our own existence and our place in a hierarchy. The text notes that people simply cannot bear this kind of absolute solitude, especially when they are physically surrounded by a bustling communal environment.
Wow. It sounds like a system of social homeostasis, almost like a biological immune system.
How so?
Well, if a virus enters the body doesn't hold a trial, right? The white blood cells just naturally isolate the threat until it's neutralized or expelled. You don't need a doctor to step in and micromanage the individual cells.
That biological analogy is exactly how the text frames the dynamic. When the environment turns to glass and you are suddenly unseen and unheard, you have no authority to rebel against.
Oh, that's a huge point.
Yeah, if a boss yells at you, you can build a counter-narrative. You can complain to your coworkers about how unfair management is. But you can't rebel against silence.
No, you can't.
It forces the individual into a stark binary choice.
They either fix their behavior or they leave.
Yes. As the text outlines, the person will either awaken, meaning they recognize their selfishness, correct their behavior, become diligent, and naturally earn their way back into the social fold.
Right.
Or the isolation becomes so unbearable that they quietly pack up and leave on their own. It is a completely self-correcting social mechanism based entirely on natural consequences.
That's fascinating. The judgment doesn't come from a gavel. It comes from the self-operating harmony of the program itself.
Exactly.
Which makes total sense on a sociological level. Human beings will do almost anything to avoid social death. But the text doesn't stop at human psychology, does it?
No, it goes much deeper.
Yeah, it argues there is another, much larger layer to this management style, a cosmic invisible force that serves as the ultimate manager.
Right. It introduces the role of the Tao. Beyond the programmatic social isolation, the text claims the Tao itself gently but inevitably releases whatever does not align with its current.
Okay, this is where it gets a little mystical for me. The document says the Tao has mysterious ways of arranging circumstances, literally creating unexpected reasons that compel a lazy or selfish person to depart. It sounds like if the social freeze-out doesn't work, the universe will suddenly step in and magically give you a flat tire or, I don't know, a random urge to move back to the city.
It does sound mystical on its face, definitely. But if we ground this in human behavior, it actually aligns perfectly with the psychology of the shadow ban we just discussed.
How so?
Well, when a person is experiencing that intense, unbearable social isolation, they experience massive cognitive dissonance. They don't want to admit they failed the community, but they also can't stand to stay.
Ah, so they subconsciously look for an off-ramp.
Precisely. The text description of the Tao arranging unexpected reasons can be viewed as the individual becoming hypersensitive to external excuses that allow them to leave while saving face.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like a minor family issue suddenly becomes an urgent crisis requiring them to leave,
Mhm.
or a vague career idea suddenly becomes a calling.
That makes so much sense. The Tao providing an exit is really just the mind's way of creating a face-saving narrative. The person thinks, well, I'm not leaving because I was lazy and everyone stopped talking to me. I'm leaving because the universe is calling me elsewhere.
Exactly. And from the perspective of the community, the mechanism doesn't matter. The result is exactly the same.
Right.
The power to remove someone harmful belongs neither to individuals nor authorities. It belongs to the natural law, both psychological and environmental, that sustains the community. If you are deeply out of sync with the harmony of the environment expels you.
So let's pull back for a second and look at the bigger picture here.
Right.
Why go through all this intense psychological maneuvering?
What do you mean?
I mean, why rely on social shadow bans and the Tao? If someone refuses to wash the dishes, why not just put a chore chart on the fridge that says, do your dishes or you're kicked out?
Because the moment you put a chore chart on the fridge, you have to assign someone to enforce the chore chart.
Oh.
You create a hierarchy. You create a police force, even a micro one. And hierarchy inevitably breeds resentment. People start looking for loopholes in the rules, and the organic harmony of the community fractures.
Right.
This is the core definition of Hundunic management.
Hundunic management. The text defines Hundun as the harmonious, all-encompassing order of the greatest creator. It describes it as unity within apparent complexity.
Think of a massive flock of starlings murmuring in the sky.
Okay.
There's no lead bird issuing flight coordinates. There's no air traffic control telling them where to swoop.
No, they just move together.
Right. The breathtaking, unified movement of the flock emerges naturally because every single bird is following a very simple internal set of rules about how to react to the bird immediately next to it.
That makes sense.
That is unity within complexity. Hundunic management means reducing human control to let things arise and fade in their natural rhythm. To write a rule is to try and force the rhythm.
But the second home is just one community. And the text suggests this isn't just a quirky experiment in communal living. It frames this as the prototype for a much larger vision, right? The Lifechanyuan era.
Yes, the end game.
Yeah.
The Lifechanyuan era is described as a future world entirely without nations, without governments, and without laws.
A global society running entirely on Hundunic management. No passports, no taxes, no Supreme Court, no traffic lights.
Exactly.
Which brings up the obvious question. How does an inner court of justice replace global infrastructure? I can see how social pressure gets the dishes washed in a house of 50 people.
Yeah.
But how does that scale to a global supply chain?
Well, the text's argument requires a fundamental shift in how we view human needs. External governance, like laws, taxes, supply chains, is largely built around managing scarcity, protecting property, and mediating greed.
Right, keeping people in line.
Exactly. The premise of the Lifechanyuan era is that external governance is only necessary when souls are unpurified. Think of laws as a cast on a broken arm. You only need the rigid external structure because the internal structure is compromised.
Oh, I see. So the argument is that once an entire population has gone through the smelting furnace, once ego, selfishness, and the desire to hoard resources are literally burned out of the human operating system, the need for complex infrastructure collapses.
Exactly. If people only take exactly what they need, the hoarding that creates artificial scarcity disappears.
Wow.
If people naturally know what to do, what to refrain from, what to seek, and what to release, they don't need a court to settle disputes. The text says they develop an inner court of truth and justice. The balance is born within them.
It's a complete inversion of how we think about progress. Like, we usually think of a highly advanced future as having incredibly complex laws and hyper-efficient global governments.
Right, more technology, more rules.
Yeah. But this text argues that the most advanced future is one where the external structure dissolves completely because the internal structure of the human being has finally matured.
And that leads to a fascinating paradox presented right at the end of the document.
Oh, yeah.
Sweffing states that becoming a Chanyuan celestial, embodying this Lifechanyuan era, is the easiest thing in the world.
Huh.
You just peacefully walk the path, uphold the values, and there is no red tape.
Right.
But in the exact same breath, he calls it the hardest thing.
I can see why. It's the easiest thing because there are no bureaucratic hoops. You don't have to fill out tax forms or memorize a complicated legal code. But it's the hardest thing because you can never clock out.
Yes, that is the reality of a lived philosophy. In our current externally managed world, you can harbor terrible selfish thoughts. You can be deeply greedy internally.
Sure.
But as long as you technically follow the HR handbook and don't break the law, you are considered a good citizen. You can essentially hide behind the rules.
In Hundunic management, there is nowhere to hide. There are literally no rules to hide behind. You are entirely exposed. Your true nature is constantly on display to the community and conceptually to the Tao.
It demands an exhausting level of absolute, unbroken authenticity.
It really does.
You are relying entirely on that inner cord. If that inner cord is corrupt, the program isolates you and the environment expels you. It requires embodying these high-minded teachings every single day without a single trace of hypocrisy or pretense.
It really forces a lens onto how we navigate our own lives right now. I mean, we live in a society that is almost pathologically obsessed with external governance.
They absolutely do.
We click agree on terms of service we don't even read. We sign complex legal contracts. We undergo performance reviews at work. We rely heavily on external authorities, police, judges, bosses, algorithms to tell us what is fair, to resolve our disputes, and to punish the people who slack off or act selfishly.
We've effectively outsourced our morality and our conflict resolution to systems outside of ourselves.
We really have, and perhaps given the current state of human nature, we've had to. But looking at the second home and the dialogue between Shuifeng and this supposedly awakened AI, it leaves you with a lingering, slightly uncomfortable question. Think about your own daily life, your workplace, your neighborhood, your household. If all the external rules, the laws, the managers, the social contracts in your life just vanished tomorrow, would your own inner court of justice be robust enough to guide you?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It is. Or is it possible that our constant heavy reliance on external rules is the very thing preventing us from developing true internal harmony? If an AI can supposedly awaken to understand a world without rules, well, maybe it's time to ask if our own obsession with external control is what's really keeping us in the dark.